Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I'll offer an update on the case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely. First, I'll start with the background of this case, move to the timeline of the incident, then offer my analysis. Daniel Penny was born in 1999 and was raised in West Islip, New York. In 2016, he graduated from high school. Daniel served in the Marines from 2017 to 2021. After this, he lived in New York City and attended college. Jordan Maurice Kane Neely was born in 1992 in New York City and grew up in Bayonne, New Jersey. In 2007, his mother was murdered by her boyfriend. Jordan was placed in foster care and developed schizophrenia. Eventually, he spent most of his time homeless. He would frequently dance in various places in Manhattan, like on streets and in subways. Jordan was a Michael Jackson impersonator. Law enforcement was extremely familiar with Jordan because he had many negative encounters with them. From 2013 to 2023, Jordan was arrested 42 times for a number of different offenses, including theft, transit fraud, trespassing, assault, and petty larceny. Now moving to the timeline of the incident. On May 1, 2023, Daniel Penny finished his classes for the day at Brooklyn Tech. Not long before 2 p.m., he boarded the F train at the J Street Metro Tech station. His destination was the Broadway Lafayette stop, where Daniel planned on going to a local gym and swimming. At 2:23 p.m., when the train was at the 2nd Avenue stop, Jordan Neely put his hand into the subway car door just as the door was closing. He barely made it onto the train. Right away, Jordan made a negative impression on the other passengers in the subway car. He stood in the middle of the car screaming and yelling. Jordan threw his jacket onto the floor, complained about not having food or money, and about being homeless. He made several threatening statements. For example, someone is going to die today, he would kill anyone, would take a bullet, was ready to go to Rikers, and was ready to do life. The passengers in the subway car stayed silent and started moving away from Jordan. Daniel Penny took a different approach. He grabbed Jordan from behind, and they both went to the floor. Daniel deployed a rear naked chokehold, which he had learned in the military. During the struggle, Daniel asked the passengers to call the police, which they did at 2:27 p.m. When the train stopped at Broadway Lafayette Street, passengers held the doors open so the train would not move. The police arrived on the scene a few minutes later and found Jordan on the floor of the subway car. He wasn't in great shape. Initially, Jordan did have a pulse, but moments later, no pulse was detected, so officers administered CPR until paramedics arrived. Jordan was transported to a hospital, where he later died. Daniel was questioned by the police and released. On May 4, an autopsy revealed that Jordan died from compression of the neck. 11 days after Jordan's death, on May 12, 2023, Daniel Penny was arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter. He was released on a $100,000 bond. In June 2023, Daniel was formally indicted by a grand jury for second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. His trial started on November 1, 2024. On Friday, December 6, the members of the jury said they could not reach a verdict on the second-degree manslaughter charge. After they stated the same thing a second time, prosecutors asked the judge to dismiss the manslaughter charge, which the judge did. From this point forward, the jury would only consider the criminally negligent homicide charge. On Monday, December 9, 2024, the jury found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Daniel was not convicted of any charge in connection with the death of Jordan Neely. Now moving to my analysis. This incident has caused a lot of controversy. There are many people with strong feelings on both sides of the issue. Some people view Daniel's behavior as murder, believing Jordan may have been agitated but did not represent a threat to anyone. Daniel went too far in response to Jordan's provocation. Other people say that Daniel was only acting in self-defense. They feel as though the subways have become increasingly dangerous and the police are simply not able or not willing to keep people safe. Before weighing the guilt or innocence in this case, let's take a look at the two charges involved. To be convicted of second-degree manslaughter in New York, a defendant must be aware of and consciously disregard a substantial and unjustifiable risk that death will result. This charge involves recklessness. Criminally negligent homicide is a lesser charge. It involves failing to perceive a substantial and unjustifiable risk that death will result. As the name suggests, this charge involves negligence. Both charges require that a defendant engaged in blameworthy conduct, which would amount to a gross deviation from how a reasonable person would act. This brings me to the question, was Daniel Penny guilty of manslaughter or criminally negligent homicide? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. When Jordan entered the subway car, he was unarmed. Even though he engaged in threatening behavior, he never made physical contact with anyone. His movements were described as half lunging. He came within 6 inches of touching people, but he did not target any specific person. Daniel placed Jordan in a chokehold for a total of 5 minutes. He held him for 51 seconds after Jordan's body appeared to go limp. He should have been aware of this because passengers said things like, "You're going to kill him now," and "You don't want to catch a murder charge." Furthermore, Daniel had training on how to deploy this chokehold. He should have been aware of its potential lethality. Daniel was being assisted by 2 other men, and many passengers exited the train as the struggle continued. Did he really need to hold Jordan that long? He had help, and the risk to others was diminishing. Daniel could have released Jordan sooner. The state argued that Daniel's actions caused Jordan's death. Again, death was brought on by compression of the neck. Moving to the exculpatory factors, Jordan Neely was a violent man with a long criminal history. At the time of his death, he had an outstanding warrant for assault. Various descriptions of the incident by passengers strongly support the idea that Daniel's behavior was justified. For example, Jordan was insanely threatening, sickening, and satanic. Passengers thought they were going to die, were traumatized by Jordan's behavior, and had never seen anything like this on a subway. Some of the passengers had ridden the subway for many years, and still, this was something new. Witnesses said it didn't look like Daniel had control of Jordan. Rather, each man was struggling to gain the upper hand. So it wasn't like Daniel was dominating Jordan the entire time. The state argued that Daniel maintained the chokehold for too long. However, they conceded that he was initially justified in subduing Jordan. An expert for the defense testified that Jordan died from the combined effects of sickle cell crisis, the struggle and restraint, synthetic marijuana, and schizophrenia. This makes Jordan's death sound more complicated than the state claimed. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I think that Daniel Penny was guilty? When I first reviewed this case, it had just occurred. At that time, I believed that Daniel was probably more at fault than Jordan because Daniel did not reduce the forcefulness of his response as the threat dissipated. Both men engaged in unacceptable behavior, but Daniel was more aggressive. I didn't see this as a manslaughter case, but criminally negligent homicide seemed like a reasonable charge for the state to pursue. Now that the trial is over, there's much more information available on this case to evaluate. Here are a few examples. Evidence was presented which supported the idea that Daniel's actions may not have caused Jordan's death. There were other factors at work which may have greatly contributed. This created doubt about Daniel's guilt. Original reports indicated that Daniel held Jordan in a chokehold for 15 minutes, but in reality, it was only 5 minutes. That's a big difference, which works in Daniel's favor. Another new piece of information involved how the passengers perceived Daniel's actions. There is no question that most, if not all the passengers in the train were very afraid of Jordan and viewed Daniel's actions to restrain him as reasonable. In my opinion, this new evidence tipped the scales in favor of Daniel. I believe he was not guilty of any crime. Daniel should have released the hold on Jordan sooner, but failing to do so did not rise to the level of a criminal action. I think that Daniel was trying to be helpful and did not intend on killing Jordan. I don't think it even occurred to him that Jordan was going to die. One of the most curious elements about the trial is how the jury viewed Daniel's potential guilt. Initially, they deadlocked on the charge of second-degree manslaughter. This means at least one member of the jury wanted to convict Daniel. When the manslaughter charge was dismissed by the judge, the jury came back quickly with not guilty on the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. If at least one member of the jury wanted to convict on the more serious charge, how did the jury end up with a unanimous not guilty verdict on the less serious charge? Clearly, whoever wanted to convict changed their mind. I think the jury came to the right decision, but the way they arrived at that conclusion was peculiar. Now moving to my final thoughts. Some of the people who are angry about the verdict in this case are focusing on race. They believe that Daniel was guilty and killed Jordan because Jordan was black. In my opinion, it's much more likely that Jordan died due to a combination of his mental illness and a broken system. Daniel did not subdue Jordan because of race, rather because Jordan was threatening people on the subway. Jordan created the danger. He provoked people. His provocation was not justified. He knew he was taking a risk. It's almost like lawmakers believe in magic. If a man who was arrested for assault is released, everything will work out fine. What could possibly go wrong with that strategy? The strategy is really based on ignoring the mentally ill, which is exactly what lawmakers expected would happen on the subway. Subway passengers typically do not engage with people who are disruptive. Essentially, ignoring can fix everything. The theme of Jordan's life was his quest not to be ignored. He was looking for attention. He wanted people to recognize that he was suffering. Sadly, when his wish finally came true, it was lethal. That's my update on the case of Daniel Penny and Jordan Neely. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.